Alright, so recording started. I apologize, my voice is a little bit raspier than normal or harder to understand than it already is. My throat's not 100% yet. But to jump in, last time we were making a bunch of modular grid assets and throwing them in Engine. We've got this nice little collection of grid assets in this old Victorian style quick little room. Everybody hopefully has some kind of modular grid components they can use, whether the ones you've been working on for assignment 3 or just whatever you followed along with last week. And this week we're going to talk about texturing them. So there are two main ways to go about this. One is called Substance Designer, which I won't get into here, but in case you wanted to look it up. And the other is continuing to use Substance Painter, the one that we're familiar with, but using it a little bit differently than we have been up until this point. So let's crack this open. So as we know, a key component to everything we've been doing so far is that our UVs tile. So I think I mentioned this before, but anywhere that the UVs go out of this 0 to 1 space, it's going to repeat the texture over again, and our tiles will repeat. So this means we can create what are called tiling textures that we can repeat infinitely across any given space. This week's activity does follow that sort of premise. This image is way too big, so you can't really see the words. Where we are going to generate some tiling textures. We're going to create special UVs for our modular kit. And then for the weekly, we'll just kind of submit, hey, here are my textures. Here's how I'm actually using them on my models and what the UVs look like, just so I can get a good idea of your understanding of everything. So it's relatively simple. It's nothing crazy. And if you follow along in class, you'll be well done. So this one won't be due next week. It'll just be due this Thursday like normal. I'm not sure if Josiah plans to start with the diorama content starting next week or if he's planning on starting this week. If he is planning on starting next week, then this week he will probably cover a lot of this tiling texture stuff as well. So not that one. So let's take a look at some of what tiling textures are. I'm definitely spelling his name correctly, so I don't know why he's not showing up. So this is the idea behind tiling textures. We're going to follow all of the same rules that we've been following up until this point. We learned about PBR. We learned about creating these individual maps. We're doing normal maps. We're doing roughness maps. We're doing diffuse maps. Now we want to do all of that, but we're going to do it in a way where we're actually just going to texture a flat plane. Now this is the work of Daniel Tiger. He works with Substance Designer, which is a procedural tileable texture creation package. It just does what we're going to do here, but on a whole nother level. The idea still remains the same though. We're going to create a bunch of different textures that we can use on different models. Unfortunately, one thing Daniel doesn't do is showcase these textures on different models, which would be great for helping us kind of understand why we want to use these. But he does show off some of the individual bits, right? Most of the time we're talking tiling textures, we're thinking of things that are too big to be textured normally with a single UV map. Things like walls, ground, giant rocks or mounds of bones, any of these environments that typically need more space than our 1-to-1 UV maps allowed. So he did a lot of work on Outer Worlds too, I guess. Right, all kinds of intricate detail. So we're going to get started by actually going in and creating some tiling textures for our environment, and then we'll work on kind of merging it all together with the models. To get started, I'm looking at our scene here. We're going old and kind of Victorian, so probably I'm going to lean into two major tiling textures for this. I want one that is wood, that I can apply to all of my wood-like assets, the trim at the bottom, these little banisters here. And then I probably want a second material that's maybe a wood flooring for all of our floorboards. And then maybe a third material that's like a wallpaper to put on the wall in between everything else. So to get started, the first thing I need to do is create a base for my textures. Typically, the easy way to do that when we're texturing for these tileable modular assets is to use the same kind of scale as our modular assets. So we know that for our scene, this little Victorian scene, I've made these walls and these floors a size of 2 meters by 2 meters, whether they're upright or not. So I want a texture that's 2 meters by 2 meters so that everything matches. So I'm not actually going to use this one, but I am going to just make a new plane. If I turn on my screencast, I am just going to make a new plane with Shift A. And I'll just move it to the center here and rotate it. Control A to apply the rotation. Now I know that the default plane here is 2 by 2 meters. So this is everything that I need to get started with creating my tileable texture. What I want to do from here is just literally grab the plane and export it. I'll use that hotkey, Control-Shift-F. And then your operator presets here, you don't need to use, you just need to export this. We just need this basically flat plane. So I'm just going to press Mesh and just turn off animation because we don't need that extra information. Everything else doesn't matter. Let's put this on the desktop. And I'm just going to call this basic tile. Okay. So I've got basic tile now on my desktop. We can hop into Substance Painter. And if we open our basic tile, I'm still going to be using the standard PBR metallic roughness alpha blend. And then document resolution 1024 is just fine. Let's click OK. The one setting you do need to check is selected objects. I forgot to do that. Okay, so now we have a basic tile. Let's go back to Blender for a second and just look at this tile's UVs. So the default flat plane is, shockingly to nobody, going to have a UV that covers exactly this UV texture space. Okay, the texture space is a square and our model is a square. So even if you have kit assets, let's say your modular assets aren't necessarily square, when we go to our texturing, we are just going to want to use a plane anyway. We need to make sure that our UV is touching every single corner perfectly. If it's not, when we go to create our tiling texture, it's not going to tile properly. So with that guaranteed, we can start painting. And this is where we'd begin to make a tiling texture. But right now, it's a little bit hard to tell if our texture is tiling or not. So something else I'm going to do is use that instance parameter, Alt-D, with the snapping on. And I'm just going to move one to the side, one to the top, one to the other side, one to the bottom. And I'm going to put these all on a separate material for reasons that'll make sense in a minute. Oh. We'll just give these all some kind of material tiling. Select all these. Control L, link. And we'll export this again to our tile. So now because they're sharing UVs, I can actually see the tiling and I can paint across those seams. So my tiling texture is what's taking up this box here. But because I have these additional ones with the matching UVs, we can easily create a texture that tiles in all 3 directions, or all 2 directions. Yep.
D is not making a copy of it for me. It's making a copy.
Alt D.
Alt D, yeah, it's making a copy of it the origin point for something. It's just the origin point.
Select the thing.
Yep. Alt D.
That's right.
Just the origin point is a weird one.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Hit Control and period. You shouldn't see this little axis. Does that not hide this axis for you?
Nope, it's not making any access for period.
Okay. In that case, just use Shift D. It should work well enough for now.
I just pressed Shift D and that made the axis appear.
That I'm not entirely sure. You might have a different control scheme going on, or maybe one of your hotkeys is stuck down. Okay.
What does Control L? Did you say use Control L to link the materials?
Yeah, so they just all have the same material.
Shift D
It shows up here.
It's also doing the same thing.
It sounds like one of your hotkeys might be broken then. I'm not sure I can help with that.
So, do we just like take a wall and just like hold D to make all of the different directions from up, down, up, and like that?
Pretty much. I've just got 4 of the exact same plane side by side, and because they're touching, I can make sure that when I go ahead and texture this, whether I'm hand painting or anything else, everything tiles.
Okay,
If you wanted to absolutely make sure everything's tiling, you can fill in the corners as well, and then you will have 0 chance of making this not tile.
Oh, I got it working now.
Cool.
Don't know why it was working.
So if I re-import that, now I can paint over every single individual axis, and it will always tile. Okay, great. So now that I have my tiling plane, we can start to develop some kind of tiling texture, and this is pretty simple. We're going to texture this just like we would have textured any other asset, but instead of worrying about individual model detail, we're going to just worry about the texture as a whole.
How did you link them again? In Blender?
I just added a material to all of them. So they all have the same material. So let's say the first thing that we want to work on is some kind of wood. Just like we would for any other object, we're going to come in here and I'm just going to grab some kind of wooden base that we can use to get started with. And I'll drag the wood walnut on here. And right away you'll see that we don't have any visible seam lines between our tiles, which means that everything is working well. From here we can kind of start to add our individual detail. I might change the color of this wood to something a little bit more what we're looking for. I can change the roughness of the wood. And the ring steps. Just trying to get a pretty decent looking wood here. I don't want to just leave it as a base material, right? So we are going to start to add some variation as much as we can. I'll add a new fill layer by pressing on the paint bucket up here. Okay. By default, that fill is just going to be white. I want this fill specifically to affect our roughness channel because I want to add some roughness variation. So let's go ahead and get rid of everything else. I'll add a black mask to this fill by right-clicking and adding a black mask. And then inside the black mask, I would like to add another fill where I can put my noise. So I'm going to right click on the black mask and press add fill. And here finally we can pop into our grayscale and add some kind of noise. So I'll look for some kind of contrasting tiling grunge. And the great thing about Substance Painter, because all of these texture maps are actually built with Substance Designer, they tile by default. So next year in Modeling 2, you'll learn how to make your own Substance Designer nodes or Substance Painter nodes with Substance Designer. But for this year, we can just use what's available to us here. So let's find a grunge that's nice, and it will automatically tile for us. So as I look at this, I'm thinking if this is an old Victorian wood, probably what's going on is it's all been lacquered, and over time that lacquer is wearing off. So I want to look for some kind of roughness variation that would replicate worn down lacquer across this wood.
What about dust wide?
Dust wide could be one. Any one of these really would probably be pretty good. So here's one that I think works pretty well. Right, we're adding just a little bit of roughness variation here to our wood. So if this was a lacquer, it would have a very low roughness value, right? You can imagine things that are lacquered are typically going to be pretty shiny. And now I want to add a little bit more detail to this texture still. So I'll add another fill layer, add another black mask, and add another fill layer to this black mask. Okay, so that process should be pretty familiar to you by now. We've done it quite a few times. Except this time, instead of looking for some kind of grunge, I might look for some kind of dirt. Again, what's really going to set your textures and your environment apart from everybody else's is creating these layers of extra detail to separate your material from just a base material found in Substance Painter. So if I find something that looks like it would realistically work for dirt on a surface of this kind, right? If we're thinking old Victorian, maybe abandoned a little bit, this is probably somewhere in the wheelhouse of what we might find. I'm going to randomize it just to get something different. Can't actually randomize this one, that's fine. And we'll just adjust the balance, adjust the color of the dirt. And make sure that the dirt is affecting the other maps that it should affect as well. So a little bit of height there. A little bit more on the rougher side. And no metallic. Now with this dirt, I'm running into an issue. We can see that this dirt is tiling incredibly obviously. So while I like the dirt texture that we have, I have this problem of this large detail on the map. If I was to look at this texture on a large surface, I'm going to see that large detail over and over again. Especially with these tiling textures, it's important that we create small variations in our detail, because if we make big ones, it's going to be really noticeable. So I'm not just going to stop here with the dirt, I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to come in to my mask and just add a paint layer on top of my fill layer. I can press on the brush icon down here And I'm going to pick this brush right here. Just artistic brushing works pretty well. Or we can find some other one that's closer. Dirt splash, dirt brushed, or just dirt one.
Where did you find the brush?
There's this brush icon here in your assets library, and that'll pop up a ton of different brushes.
For me, it's different. It's on the left, and there's a filter thing which you filter by brushes, and then they appear.
It could be changed. This is a very old version of Substance Painter, but yeah. So if it's different in yours, Devin said it's on the left somewhere, and you just have to filter for brushes. But the other option, of course, is you could always just come down to your alpha in your paintbrush and just click here and find one that suits you. In this case, I'm going to use this dirt to start masking away that really large element in my texture. So you can see if I click, this texture is pretty similar to the texture of the actual dirt that we're trying to include. I'll just go down here, change my grayscale to black. And then by using this brush, I can actually paint out this dirt. And because I'm using a brush that is so similar to the original texture, we're not really noticing the paint strokes, even though they're repeating still. So now this level of detail repeating is still a little bit noticeable, but compared to that large splotch we had that was so obviously repeating, it's way, way, way better, right? So we have a little bit of stuff built up. And one thing that we don't really have here though is any normal or height map data. So let's rename our layer for dirt as dirt. And then I'll make one more fill layer here. And this one's going to be for some scratches or other type of wear.
Could you not just turn down the balance so that it's not as splotchy?
Turn down the what, sorry?
The balance on the dirt, on your dirt.
Well, if you turn down the balance, you could. But you're also removing detail from other areas, and you're getting less contrast as a result as a whole, if I can find it. I've essentially wiped out every single detail to get to a point where it doesn't look like it's repeating too much. The issue just mostly boils down to this area is too hot. And if we add that paint, we can cool that area down. You could also adjust your paint layer just to help it kind of blend in a little bit more. And then we're still left with something that's not super duper obvious. So for the scratches, I'm going to do all the same things that we've been doing. Add a fill. And use some scratch material that's provided to us. And again, the reason I'm using these provided materials is because these always tile. As long as they're in Painter like this, they will tile, and we won't be at any risk of having non-tiling textures. When we start to hand paint certain things, that's when we start to maybe run the risk of having things not tile properly. But that's also why we have it set up like this. This 9-tile setup will help mitigate our paint stroke inconsistencies through our tiles. So I only want this one to affect the, actually let's have it just affect everything. We'll bring the height value down a little bit as scratches kind of would. We'll use a base color here that's a little bit brighter, but we'll change the opacity. We'll change the roughness to be very rough in these scratches because the lacquer would be completely gone. Maybe we can adjust the height even more to really kind of sell these scratches and everything. Okay. So that's not looking too bad. We've done all of our texturing as if this was any other asset. It's just not an asset. So now I'm going to export these textures into Unity. A question or something that was mentioned to me last week is someone was asking how I'm able to so quickly change the assets in Engine. It's because I'm exporting everything directly to the engine. I'm not exporting to like my desktop or a documents folder and then importing into Engine. Everything that I export from my modeling package or substance package is just going to go straight into Engine. So I'm going to go find my folder in Unity. Textures. And inside this, I'll just add a new folder called tiling wood dirty. Under the output template, this is very important, and you should have learned how to do this in the weekly activities and everything. I'm going to be looking for Unity Universal Render Pipeline, metallic standard. Check our list of exports, and we're good to go. The last thing I could change here is it's currently basic tile and then underscore tiling because our material name here is tiling. Now that we know what kind of material this is, rather than just leaving it called tiling, I'm just going to change this to wood dirty so that we know what this is actually a part of. So now when I export, you'll see my name is changed here to wood dirty. Okay. I could even, for this one, get rid of the basic tile prefix here. Since these don't need to be a part of any particular model, they're just textures in their own right. If I wanted to do that, I can come down here to the Unity URP pipeline, and just in the front of every map where it says mesh, I could delete the part that says mesh. Okay. I'll leave it for now so it doesn't yell at me because it's a default template. It's not too happy I'm doing that. And then we'll save and export. Do keep in mind, we're only exporting one tile of this. If I go to the 2D view, we can see what one tile of this material actually looks like, right? We have 9 of them here, but there's only one we're exporting. Everything looks good, export. Anybody remember what the next step is after we import material or textures into Unity? No?
Put it onto a material?
Almost. There's something else we have to do to our textures before we put them into materials.
Okay, I know that for the normal map, you gotta change, like the normal map texture, you gotta change it to that. So you can tell Unity that's what it is.
Yep, that's it. So we have to change our compression settings for our different textures. So the most obvious one and the most important one is changing our normal map. Again, it will tell you and yell at you and say, hey, this is not marked as normal map, but it's good to just stay ahead of these things. So we can click on our normal map and just make sure to come in here and say, hey, this texture type is actually a normal map. Click apply. And for our color texture, we're just going to make sure that sRGB is checked off because we exported it as sRGB from Painter. So now let's make a material out of it. I'll make a new material and just call this tiling wood dirty. And we can drag our appropriate maps in. So base map in, metallic map in, and then our other map in. Set this to 1. Okay, and now I have this tiling wood dirty material. Now, the way our objects are set up makes this quite convenient. Our modular assets just so happen to be squares, so we don't have to do too much work to get everything together. We can look at our floor pieces here. And if I click on my floor square here, there we go. We can just drag and drop this tiling material on, and it'll just work. All right. It only works this way because our objects are complete squares, so the UVs are already good to go. But let's look at an example where the UVs aren't perfect squares and we do have to do a little bit of UV work. So I also want these objects here to be a similar matching kind of wood, but I obviously don't want them to be the exact same color because that would be kind of boring. So for these, I'm going to just duplicate my tiling material by hitting Control-C and then Control-V. And this will be tiling wood dirty dark. And the only thing I'm going to do is just go into Unity's little built-in tint setting here, and I'm just going to tint this a little bit, maybe a little bit of red, and drop the value a little bit. And I'll just drag and drop it on here to get an idea. Eventually we're going to want to use this for these objects. So we can drag those on now. We'll eventually get these set up with proper material references, so you don't have to drag and drop it every time, but just to get an idea of what it might look like. So I think the tint here is actually not too bad. It's just a little bit saturated. I'll just dial it back a bit. There we go. But we'll notice that our UVs are not aligned in a way that we would expect. We would expect these wood trim panels to have the wood texture kind of going across. So this is where we have to start manipulating our UVs a little bit in order to make these work for our models. So this grid, I don't even actually need it anymore. I'll throw it into a different folder and hide it. And we'll come back to our walls. So let's make this bigger. This also doesn't need to exist. There we go. So right now we don't have any material references built into our objects, which is why I had to just go drag and drop our material into each one of these, but that's something we don't really want to do. We want to be able to change these on the fly super quickly and easily for a bunch of different assets. So I'm going to start setting up these individually with materials. And we'll start with our most basic wall square. And I just want to find that panel, there it is, and our in-betweener, there we go. So all of our assets that we want to have this wooden material here, I'm going to just create a new material in Blender to create those material references. And I'll just call this one dark wood. Doesn't matter what it's called, what matters is that everything that shares this shares the material. So I'm going to use that same trick again. Click, 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 and then Control L to copy my materials. So now if I link, you'll see all three of these objects are using that dark wood material. Great. For the wall square itself, I'm going to make a new material and call it wallpaper. We don't actually have a wallpaper material yet, but I want to be able to quickly change things when we do. So let's take everything we have and just re-export it into Engine using our proper preset. And this one is inside of our models folder. As floor square, I believe. No. Okay. This one is wall square. And I'll just re-export the floor because we probably want to actually see our textures. But while we're here, we might as well update this and call this one give this one a material called light wood. And this is floor square. There we go. So now in Engine here, we have access to what's called on-demand remaps. And this is essentially just looking at our models, figuring out what materials are on them, and then Unity gives us an option to map one of its Unity materials to this material slot that we created in Blender. It's super simple, but it's super useful. So let's say I didn't drag and drop that onto all of these. So let's just go overrides, revert. Okay. So our floor grids here, I haven't dragged and dropped, but I want to change all of my floors at once because obviously dragging and dropping takes a long time. If I click onto my floor square model in my inspector, we can just change this light wood spot. And if we drag and drop our tiling texture in here and apply, it's going to apply it to all of these models. And I can do the exact same thing for the floor corner. Once we export that into the engine. So floor corner, it'll re-import, oops, light wood. And then we can tell it, hey, floor corner should also have this light wood material. So why is this important? Well, as you build your environment, you might want to iterate on things. And you might decide, hey, actually, I want to flip this so that the dark material is on the floor and the light material is on the walls. And you're not going to want to have to go through and individually drag and drop every single one of these materials onto these different assets. So your best bet is to make sure your material preferences are set up ahead of time. And then later down the line, you can just go back to your model settings and quickly change this out. Right? I could change this entire floor in just a single swoop, the traffic kit, and now the entire floor is traffic kit.
That's a lot better than the way I was doing it.
Yes.
I was making a prefab of every single object.
Yeah, you don't have to do
So
all
I could
that.
just change the prefab, which would change everything.
Right. So these are actually prefabs technically by default. When they're imported, they're originally imported as packages, and as long as you keep them packed within their packages, you can do all this prefab-like stuff without having to create individual prefabs.
That's going to save a bunch of time.
It will. So let's take that same approach for this piece. I'm going to just quickly undo my overrides because those will stay no matter what. These overrides I don't want on these objects right now though. Overrides, revert. All right. So for this object, I'm going to do the exact same thing. We just got it set up for our dark wood and our wallpaper. So I will do the same thing. Dark wood, wallpaper we haven't made yet, so we can ignore that. And there we go. Now we've got our dark wood applying to all of our different objects. Except this one, because I was messing with it, now it doesn't want to adhere to the defaults.
Did you unwrap those objects?
Nope. Those are just the default UVs. We are about to unwrap them in about 12 seconds though. I'm just going to re-export the window wall first in the same manner. So wallpaper, all this other stuff is the same. And we'll export this one as the window wall. And just that way we can make sure we do the same thing here. So wood dark. There we go. Apparently I missed a piece. It was this one? Yeah. There we go. Okay, so let's look at UVing something that isn't going to be perfectly square, but we still want to make use of these tiling textures. So in this case, I've got this asset. The UVs right now are no good. I haven't actually UV unwrapped anything. I've just got the default asset as it is. The good thing about using these tiling textures is we're not too worried about perfect UVs, and it's okay if some of our UVs overlap. So up until now, we've wanted to avoid overlapping UVs as much as possible. And for most of our one-to-one assets, this has to be true. But when we're using these tiling textures, as long as we try not to break up the tiling too much, we can manipulate the UVs in any way we want. We could have them go outside of the 0 to 1 space. We could have them, cut up and on top of themselves. And the end result won't be that bad, because the texture is still tiling. So you can see that we obviously have stretching and stuff like that because we just made an absolute tomfoolery of these UVs. But unlike when you're using the one-to-one textures, making a tomfoolery of your UVs doesn't totally break everything. So we're going to use that to our advantage here and unwrap this quickly without too much fuss. So I'm not too worried about stretching. I'm just going to add a big old seam around here. Control E, mark seam. And because these corner pieces are super invisible, I'm just going to mark a bunch of seams around this side just to make my life easier. And I'll hit U twice to unwrap it. Now I do want to be able to actually see the material. So under base color for my wood, I'm just going to go ahead and click image texture and then open up the image texture from Unity. So that's past textures, tiling wood, and we'll open up the albedo. Okay, so now I can get a good look at how this tiling texture is going to apply to my model. And I can just go face by face individually and kind of figure out where I want to put it in my UV. So let's grab this top face. I'm going to go into face mode, select this UV, and I'll just rotate it 90 degrees so that the wood is tiling in the direction that I want it to. And you can see that it's breaking here and it's not tiling perfectly. But at this scale, it doesn't even matter, right? You can't even see it. So I'll grab this one and I'll rotate this one as well. Again, so little care to my UVs overlapping. With tiling textures, that's not super relevant. And then I want to take this big one and rotate it 90 degrees so our grain is going in the direction we want, and I can just find a spot on my texture map that I think looks pretty good. Maybe somewhere like there looks pretty good. I don't actually need this backside, so I'm just going to delete it as a whole. And there we go. I've got one piece down. So let me do the same thing for our other pieces that are a part of this. This skirt we made, I want to do something similar. I'll grab everything and rotate it 90 degrees, put it somewhere on my texture map, and I'm just worried about the grain going the right direction. Yep.
Where are you making the texture go in the model for when it's being made?
You want to go into your material, and under base color, you can select image texture.
Okay.
And where you do that, you can just open up the image texture you already made. Jason?
If this was a bigger object and you care about the corner like all the way through, how would we deal with that?
If it were a bigger object, just don't have a seam there.
Oh, right.
So yeah, anywhere there's a seam, you're going to get a seam cut, which is more noticeable with tiling textures than with your one-to-one textures. But if you want to avoid it, just try and avoid a seam cut. So like something like this, it is perfectly tiling over this edge here because I don't have a seam there. It's all perfectly tiling. So let's do this to the last piece, which is this one here. I'll delete all of the faces that are not necessary. Actually, unfortunately, that's just this one. And then I'll add some seams at the top and bottom to separate it. Control E, mark seam. Unwrap. I can select just the faces I want here. And I want these to go with the grain upwards, so I'll just rotate that 90 degrees and put this somewhere. Awesome. So now the grain on all of my individual objects here is going exactly where I would want it to. And when I export this, so we'll export the wall square window. And then I'll flip this around and export the wall without the window. In Unity, our grain is showing up exactly the way we wanted it to. We could go as far in Blender as to set up our roughness maps and everything as well, but base color is typically enough to get an idea of how your material is looking in here. Okay, so that's two pretty key elements out of the way. Let me just adjust this a little bit more because I think it's a little bit too aggressive. But that really didn't take too long at all. And now I've got a kit that I can build a real fleshed out level with. So this is going to be really important to you guys. If your teammates are not here today, I highly recommend you get them familiar with the process either on your own or tell them to watch the lecture recording. This will help you build environments that are so much bigger, so much faster, and so much more varied. Next year, you'll learn a little bit more about ways to actually break up the monotony between this. So obviously with this texture tiling, it gets pretty obvious and monotonous, but there are methods and shaders we can build to break that monotony up, like the one you watched in the lecture there, Jason. If you want to know more about that, you can actually just watch the lecture on that from Modeling 2. It is uploaded right now, but it's not for Unity. You'll just have to take the concepts and apply it to Unity. So let's do a wallpaper material now. I'll hop back into Substance Painter. I can save this file as my dirty wood. And then make a new folder entirely, or a new project, sorry. But I can just reuse my basic tile. Because the basic tile isn't what has the texture on it. It just has this material called tiling that I can rename to whatever else. So now, instead of tiling, I'm going to call this one wallpaper. And go from there. So now we're right back at square one, but I can just reuse the same mesh for ease of use, right? And we can quickly make a new material. So let's make some kind of Victorian style wallpaper. I'll get started by making a new fill. And this one for our base, we'll add a little bit of color. And a moderate amount of roughness. And then we'll kind of follow that same process. So here's our base. For this one, I want to try creating a little bit more variation in the reflectiveness. These old Victorian kind of patterns usually have some crazy looking floral designs going on. So we'll see if I can't show you how to use things like stencils to create those types of patterns. I don't know if there are any already built in here, so I'm just going to take a quick peek before I go making our own. But something like this actually could work quite well. So with a new paint fill in our mask, I'm able to grab something like this fabric circle. And I just want to give it some red color for now, just so we can start to actually see what's going on. Oh, that's a paint layer, not a fill layer. And I'm going to increase the tiling of this quite a bit here. Maybe something like this. Yep.
I have the fill layer on this. For some reason, when I tried doing it, it's not appearing.
This fill layer inside the mask.
Yep.
Make sure it's a fill layer, not a paint layer. When I first added it, I had a paint layer by accident. So I might use this as some kind of reflectivity. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a metallicness and no color. I just kind of want it to shine a smidgen. But I don't want it to be overly aggressive. This is just like a passing detail if you look at it from a certain angle in the light. And then we'll go along to adding our usual smudge and grime detail. Now, this one is going to be a little bit different than our other one. When we were tiling our wood, we had to be very careful that our wood tiles in both directions, right? It needs to tile in the U direction and the V direction, because if we're going to be placing it on certain things, it's tiling in both the U and the V direction. These walls, as we have them here, well, one, they're not really tiling at all because we have these barricades in between them. But even if they were, they're only tiling in one direction. So I'm not worried about it tiling up and down for this one. I only need to make sure it tiles side to side. So that means I'm totally fair game to use things like leaky grunges and stuff like that and more directional noise to create my details. So if I add another fill layer, another black mask, and another mask fill, if I find a grunge that is super streaky and maybe applies more just to the top and bottom as it kind of would on something like wallpaper, I'm totally good to go with that because I'm only worried about it tiling side to side. So this one maybe isn't the one for me, but we can find something else that is more applicable. Humidity, great. And then we can change our values here as we would just like anything else. Cool. I want to change my little half circle thing going on here. Doesn't look quite right for a wallpaper. I'm sure we can find something a little bit better. That's probably a little bit more accurate.
If you wanted to like a decal that's just like across multiple tiles, would that have to be like separate object?
Yes. Yeah, since these are all sharing the same UVs and the same material, you wouldn't be able to do that between multiple. So we'll give this a slight tinge of color. And adjust our grunge humidity a little bit. This stuff isn't super specific. This is kind of just me playing around with the values and making it look better. until we get something a little bit more wallpaper-esque. And then again, I'm going to want some kind of damage on this wallpaper. So we'll add a black mask. Add some kind of fill. And find something appropriate for wallpaper damage. Right. This one has that same problem as our other one, where I'm getting these super large details that I don't really want. Just want this one to affect the height a little bit and the roughness. So we can adjust this to get a better idea. Oops. And I just want to adjust the contrast on this so it's only affecting certain parts. And then just like the other one, because these details are so obvious, I want to come in here with the paint on top. Find a brush that's suitable for this kind of damage. So before we use the dirt brush for the dirt, I might look for some kind of larger scale brush for this now. So not that one. Maybe this one. And I'll just drop this down to 0 and start painting over, just so that this is a little bit less obvious. Okay, and then I'll adjust the opacity to where it's still kind of there, but it's just not quite as aggressive. Right? And looking at it from far away can really help with figuring out what spots are causing the tiling to be obvious. So these areas, I would probably want to break them free from everything else. I'm going to go to the metallic channel, the roughness channel, and just make sure it's all set to normal here. And we'll take a quick look. Fuse color, we can make these areas darker to sort of match the grungy appearance, or lighter to look like flecks of paint. Okay. So we can now take this material just like we did the other one, export it the exact same way, make sure we switch to Unity PBR or Unity URP. We got to do this every single time. Unity, render pipeline, metallic, standard. Check our list of exports, make sure we've renamed it, and export directly into our engine. So assets, textures, that's the wrong folder. Assets, textures, old wallpaper. And the other great part about this and doing it this way is we can always come back and iterate. So this old wallpaper, I would not be happy with it if this is where I was actually going and putting this into a game. But for the sake of time, we can go through it, and we can always easily change the material later and just re-export it. And then everything will update in Engine. So let's follow that same process here again, just to make sure everything's up to snuff. We're going to go to our textures, our old wallpaper, and set this to normal map. Save. Just make sure sRGB is checked off for our color texture, and then make sure it is checked not on for our metallic smoothness and our roughness, because those are not sRGB textures, they're linear. And then we can go back and make our next material. Create, material, wallpaper. Here we go. Our base map, our metallic smoothness map, and our normal map. Now we didn't generate an ambient occlusion map for any of these, but that would just add a whole another layer of detail that you could add on top. Yep.
I have a roughness map. Where would that go?
The roughness map, when you export, if you're using the proper settings here as Unity PBR, or sorry, Unity URP, I keep saying PBR. Unity URP channel packs the roughness map into the metallic alpha. So this material, my metallic smoothness, the smoothness, quote unquote, is the roughness, and that gets packed into the alpha channel of this texture.
It gets packed like into the metallic map.
Yeah, so this map is actually both your metallic map and your smoothness map all in one. Unity knows what to do with each part of the texture, it understands. The setup is just set up that way. So if we look at Painter, you can actually see that it's doing that. You can see here the metallic smoothness, the RGB value is your metallic, and the alpha value is your glossiness. So now that we have this wallpaper material, we can do the exact same thing that we've been doing. We can go to our model components here, and because we set everything up nicely with on-demand remapping, I can just go, hey, let's put a wallpaper material in here and apply. And then for our other objects, do the same thing. Wallpaper, apply. Now, you might be seeing an issue, and I'm seeing the same issue, don't worry. This is technically square, but obviously our UVs are not. So we are going to have to adjust the UVs for this portion. So I'm going to go find wall square window, and we're going to do the same thing for the wallpaper. I'm going to go image texture in my material, open, and find that image texture. This time wallpaper, and again I'm just looking for the base color because it's the easiest to understand. Perfect. So we want to just select all of these faces, and because it's square, what we can do is just hit UU, and we'll automatically fill up our existing square here. So now this material is properly tiling along here the way it should. And then the one that doesn't matter is these sides. We're not actually ever going to see them. So I don't really care that the UVs on these parts are messed up, because I'd have to get rid of my solidify modifier to actually change those. And so it's not that important to me to actually go through and fix this, right? If you think about it in Engine, this part would never actually be showing, it's just touching another mesh beside it. So now with my UV cleaned up, I can just turn my skirts back on. And my raised panel to re-export this as my wall square with the window. You're noticing I keep having to re-export these three pieces with the different walls. So something you could do if you wanted to was in Unity build this as a prefab, have one with the window and one without, and then just have this exported as a separate piece. But because I know that these are the only two pieces using it, I don't really have a problem with having to export this every time. And there we go. Now we've got our tiling texture across this as well. And it's a little bit obvious, but it's nothing too bad. And if we do think that these long streaks sticking out is too obvious, of course we can go fix that really easily using that same technique as before. So I can come in here, find the grunge, add a paint, and kind of just come in here and clean up any area I think is a little overbearing and super repetitive. Okay. Re-export by just re-exporting. I don't need to change any settings after I do it the first time. And now it's a little bit less obvious that it's repeating. I want to bring it back a little bit more. I think that was too little. And you can see how quickly I can iterate on what the materials look like. Much better. Okay.
How would you unwrap like the inner part of the window?
The inner part of the window is in a similar vein because it's part of the solidify modifier. So there would be no actual real geometry here, right? This is all just modifier. What I would be doing is making a new piece. So if I shift D, GY to drag this out. Oops. L and P to separate. And then I would just make a window trim. Just extrude this back. And then I'll just bridge these together. And now this kind of acts as like a window sill kind of thing that we can UV unwrap and can work with. So I can do all the same stuff that I was just kind of doing. I'll make sure that this has the same material here, not wallpaper, but dark wood. And then we'll have to give this new UVs that kind of match. So if I want the UVs to work a certain way, I can just select an individual face. And if I just unwrap with one face selected, it'll act as if there's a seam around every part of that face. So now I can just literally unwrap one face, say, okay, I'm good here. Unwrap this one, make sure the grain's going the right way. And then same kind of story up here, but it looks like it's already all right up there. So now we have our window. And because of the material remapping, it knows, okay, this part should also have the same materials as everything else. And now we are good in this department as well. You might be wondering why I didn't update this one. It's because this one is actually just an original wall square, and I just changed the mesh here. So you can see if I actually grab this one, everything will be proper again. Fun. Apparently I made this entire thing off the grid just for kicks and giggles. So
I think it was when you moved it up to show your light baking.
probably part of it, yeah. But that's fine, I can just move it all over one. There we go. Okay. For this last bit here, this part, this is where things get a little bit funkier. Let's open up that part. So here we're doing all of the same kind of stuff. I want to just make sure that first and foremost it has the right material. Wallpaper. And I'll go ahead and grab this first face and unwrap it. It's sideways by default, so let's change that. I'm just going to grab this one and rotate it. And now we want to maintain a textile density of about the same. So we want the details on all the textures to be about the same. We know that this piece is actually going to be bigger than the other ones for it to have the same textile density. Does everyone remember textile density? I kind of talked about it a bit, right? Every unit of space in real life has some matching textile density. Did I tell you guys to install an add-on called Textile Density Checker? I did? Okay, cool. So I know in this project that our textile density is 512 pixels per meter. I can actually go into my add-on, say, hey, texture size of 1024, and then I can set my textile density to 512 pixels per meter, and just click Set TD. And now I know that the details on this mesh, textile-wise, are the exact same size as the details on the other parts of the wall. So I can just kind of move this into spot. Here it is. It's tiling in this side and on this side, but that's okay because we have those kind of blocker pieces in between to hide where the tiling inconsistencies lie. So now if I export this as the corner again, you'll see that the details from one mesh to the other are the same, right? Our textile density is matching. So it's important to know your textile density when you start. And then the last pieces of this obviously would be to sort of come in here and clean this up by adding our other blocker. And adding another one of these as well. So I could do this in the mesh, or I could do it in engine like this. Either way, it really works. So with this in place, it just needs to be scaled out a little bit, right? And rather than make an entirely separate mesh, I'm just going to scale this up because the difference is so minimal that it's really not going to be noticeable in the final result, right? Nobody playing your game is going to walk up to this and go, actually, your textile density here is off by like 5%. The people playing your games aren't going to notice. I will, but lucky for you, I'm not grading your games, so you don't have to worry about it at all, right? We don't have to create perfectly unique assets every single time. We want to cut corners, we're cutting corners, it seems acceptable. But I think as the result of less than an hour and a half of work, this is something that's pretty good. It's something that you should all be capable of and is a decent bar of quality for GDW games. If all your GDW games look like this, I will be pretty pleased. I think it's a decent level to reach for. It is a little bit bare bones and monotonous, but of course you guys have an entire next 4 semesters to work on it as opposed to the hour and a half that I kind of had here today. Are there any questions on this kind of stuff? For once, I feel genuinely confident that you don't actually have any questions and fully understood. I think the stuff today is pretty self-explanatory and you guys have gotten pretty familiar with Substance Painter. So, if you do have any questions in the future, feel free to reach out to me, but generally that's pretty much all I had in store for you today. Next time you come back, I'll be moving on entirely from environments. This is it. So everything from here on out will be more about character modeling, rigging, and animation. All right, on the recording there then.